Let's go ahead and get to your monologue, Krystal, because I know you've got a great point about anti-politics here.
Well, guys, there are, in one sense, about a billion things going on in the world, more important than the current efforts to shame, smear, and censor one single podcaster. You've got hunger, poverty, war, despair, climate collapse. Just take your pick. We're in the midst of a new Cold War-style conflict between two nuclear powers centered around Ukraine. The Fed is making economic life-or-death decisions right now as we speak. Inequality has soared during the pandemic to world historic levels, leading to a dystopian split screen like Jeff Bezos commanding the deconstruction of a historic bridge in order to accommodate his massive yacht. While on the other hand, you've got his former workers like Daquan Smith forced into homelessness for the crime of advocating for a union. In a certain sense, any of these topics would be a better use of our time than Joe Rogan versus the libs. Yet ironically, the very fact that the nation has become so consumed with whatever bad words Rogan has said over his multi-decade career, instead of a serious inquiry into any of the problems I just mentioned, that is in and of itself actually a gigantic issue. I don't want to be dramatic here, but the personal moral purity way of doing politics is truly a cancer, and it's eating away at our pseudo-democracy. In other words, part of why we can never address any of those real problems is because the public is continually distracted and titillated by these fake, personalized problems. But it's actually so much worse than that, because they are not just a distraction. Their centrality in our public discourse makes any sort of collective action virtually impossible. It reminds me of this infamous 1944 CIA manual on how to destroy the productivity of an organization. It's called the Simple Sabotage Field Manual, and it contains the following advice. Take a look at this. Bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible, haggle over precise wordings of communications minutes and resolutions, refer back to matters decided upon at the last meeting, and attempt to reopen the question of the advisability of that decision. Now, these precepts seem to have been applied to our entire society. In fact, debating the personal character of Joe Rogan and similar obsessions, they are a potent form of anti-politics. It feels like you're engaging in politics, like you're adding your voice to a cacophonous and vibrant democracy, but you're not. You're stuck wandering endlessly around a fake Potemkin village of democracy, while elites with an interest in maintaining the status quo are left free to make the real political decisions. You are relitigating the context within which Joe Rogan said the N-word in 2013, while the Fed decides whether or not to fork over a few more trillions to Wall Street, and private equity giants decide whether young people will ever be able to buy a home or start a family, and the oil and gas industry buys out politicians to continue forcing the planet off a climate cliff. Now, Neil Young, he was the first artist to pull his music from Spotify, and actually his arc over the course of his life is really illuminating. His original forays into activism, they were about bolstering a mass struggle against war, protesting the killings of young students at Kent State who were gunned down for their activism against the state. Under George W. Bush, he was part of a free speech tour decrying the reactionary censorship of anti-war voices. But in our modern climate of democracy sabotage, he's flipped. Now his ire is directed at Spotify for allowing too much free speech. He's the same guy, same activist impulses, yet now his activism is dedicated to bolstering power rather than fighting it. And his remedy is too perfect as well. He's pushing his fans and their dollars to one of the most powerful and nefarious companies on the planet, Amazon. Rogan's thought crimes are given higher moral priority than Amazon's mass exploitation, monopoly rigging, and modern-day indentured servitude. But Neil Young is emblematic of an influential activist population that has been tricked into thinking that they are fighting for democracy when they are actually fighting for tech oligarchs and media barons to have more power. In an ingenious sleight of hand, good and well-intentioned people who in a previous era would have fought, like Neil Young, for real democratic change and action, have instead been persuaded that handing over as much control of the public square as possible to our modern-day aristocracy is somehow sticking it to the man. They believe that the most powerful people on the planet are the ones to be trusted, and that their own powerless relatives and neighbors are the ones to be held in contempt and held to account. Because that's what the instinct toward censorship, that's what it is about at its core. It's not really about Joe Rogan. It's about adult Americans not trusting their fellow adult Americans to be able to listen to a podcast or read a Facebook post without becoming murderous, raving lunatics. And that makes these constant moral purity debates active democracy sabotage instead of just a simple bread and circuses distraction. How are you ever going to engage in collective struggle for change of the sort that led to victory for the abolitionists and the suffragists and the civil rights movement when the collective has been deemed too evil and too deplorable for a decent person to engage with at all? Why would you even want to institute universal programs when they would benefit these evil and nasty people who can't even be trusted to listen to a podcast without basically becoming the KKK? How will you challenge corporate-friendly media at scale when every channel that challenges conventional orthodoxy is tarred as a racist grift? After all, if you trust your fellow Americans to behave like grown-ups in a democracy with its necessary messy swirl of information, then whatever Rogan says, whatever guest he has on, they're really no big deal. Matt Taibbi's essential book, Hate Inc., tracks how such a large number of Americans were persuaded to trust tech oligarchs drunk on power more than their neighbors and relatives who happen to have different political views. The constant stream of propaganda from Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, it is all aimed at terrifying the people about their fellow citizens. Your struggles aren't because of a system rigged by plutocrats to deliver riches for themselves and desperation for you. No. The real threat to your well-being is your cute, curious aunt or the college kids posting their pronouns to TikTok. That's how you end up with the GOP literally poised to run on no platform and probably win historic gains. They don't have to promise that they'll deliver on anything in particular, just that they will serve as a check on the half of the country that their voters believe to be the problem. Democrats have their list of dangerous people and ideas they want to see banned that they believe the American people can't be trusted with, and Republicans have their own list of dangerous people and ideas they believe the American people can't be trusted with. That's what the CRT panic, anti-protest laws, and book banning movements are really all about. Democrats think you can't listen to a 3-hour discussion with Robert Malone without deciding vaccines or implanting microchips. Republicans think you can't raid Ibram X. Kendi without wanting to lock white people into prison camps. I reject this corrosive, anti-populist view that seeks to place power in a few concentrated hands, where the only pseudo-political struggles are whether or not our elected reps will signal that they're on our side in that culture war. In fact, a belief in actual democracy, obnoxious and frustrating as it can sometimes be, is actually at the very core of why I do this show at all, and why I'm so proud of its large and ideologically diverse audience, and why I call myself a populist. I know it can sound really hokey, but I really wanted to demonstrate that it's okay in a democracy to deal with people who might have different views than you. In fact, it is essential. Even that you might agree with them in some areas, that you might even find them to be loyal friends, trusted colleagues, that they can serve as partners in a democratic project, even though, yes, sometimes they might drive you nuts. Look, there are only two paths from where we are now. One is towards an authoritarian police state, and the other is towards a real democracy. The less that we trust our fellow adults to be able to handle bad or wrong or dangerous information, or information that just doesn't accord with our own political sensibilities, the harder we will fight for the police state and demand an end to our own democratic rights. Look, we act like our democracy is most in danger of being stolen by a cabal of nefarious wrongdoers, when the much more likely scenario is that we will willingly hand it over in exchange for censoring and banning the people we think are bad. So the cancer at the core of the fight over Joe Rogan right now, it is both a distraction from real problems and it is a symptom of how much the nation has been poisoned against itself. And this cancer, mark my words, if allowed to metastasize, will destroy whatever good is left in the American ideal. And so on the one hand, Sagar, it's silly. You can say it's bred circuses. I see people this morning like, hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.